We were sitting at the small oak table in our dining room, the one we bought together right after moving into a house in Denver. The one Vanessa insisted was perfect because it felt grown up. The food between us was already getting cold. I remember noticing that before anything else, how the steam had stopped rising from my plate while she stared past me like I wasn't even there. After 5 years of marriage, silence had become normal, but that night the silence felt deliberate, sharpened, like it was waiting for something. Then she said it, calmly, almost politely, as if she were commenting on the weather. She said she didn't think she was happy anymore. No warning, no lead-in, no fight to soften the blow. Just a statement, clean and detached. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't feel the urge to beg or panic. Something in me went still, like a switch had been flipped. I looked at her face, the same face I'd memorized over years of shared mornings and late-night talks, and realized she had already left this marriage long before this dinner. I asked her if there was someone else. My voice surprised me by how steady it sounded. She hesitated, just barely, but I caught it. It was a fraction of a second too long, the kind of pause you only notice when you already know the answer. Then she said no. She said it quickly, rehearsed, like she'd practiced in her head. I nodded, not because I believed her, but because I didn't need her to confirm what was already obvious. In that moment, everything lined up. The late nights that didn't add up. The way she tilted her phone away from me on the couch. The sudden interest in her appearance when she claimed she was exhausted. The emotional distance I blamed on stress or routine. I realized how badly I'd wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, how convenient it had been to stay blind because admitting the truth would mean admitting the marriage was already over. I didn't accuse her. I didn't list evidence or demand honesty. I just looked at her and felt something heavy settle into place, not heartbreak exactly, but clarity. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't confusion. This was a decision she'd made long ago, and tonight was just the formality. I saw then that her sadness wasn't about losing me. It was about finally saying the words out loud. She kept talking, explaining how she felt lost, how she needed to find herself, how this wasn't anyone's fault. I listened, really listened, and understood that none of it mattered anymore. Whatever story she was telling herself, whatever justification she needed, it didn't change the truth sitting between us at that table. I had been loyal, present, patient, and that still hadn't been enough, not because I failed, but because she had already chosen something else. When she finally stopped talking, the room felt oddly peaceful. I told her I understood. I'm in my own way. I understood that this was the end. There was no dramatic exit, no slammed doors. Just two people sitting across from each other, one relieved to finally speak, the other quietly done. That dinner didn't end our marriage. It only confirmed what had already been broken for a long time, and for the first time in months, I felt strangely awake. She had clearly imagined this moment going very differently. I could see it in her eyes when I didn't react the way she expected. There was supposed to be crying, raised voices, maybe me breaking down and asking what I could do to fix things. Instead, I stood up, picked up both of our plates, and walked them to the sink like this was any other night. I remember saying, "All right," in a neutral tone, not out of spite, not to prove a point, but because that was genuinely all I had left to say. The word landed heavier than any argument ever could have. That was when the script in her head started falling apart. I felt it before she said anything, the shift in the air, the sudden uncertainty. She followed me into the kitchen, her voice softer now, less decisive. She said she didn't want to just throw everything away, like this was suddenly a shared concern instead of a decision she had already made on her own. I turned off the sink and looked at her, and for the first time that night, she looked scared. Not sad, not guilty, scared. I didn't argue with her. I didn't remind her of what she'd just said at the table. I walked past her and went into the bedroom. I opened the closet and pulled out a suitcase, the same one we used for trips we used to plan together. I laid it flat on the bed and started folding her clothes with slow, careful movements. I wasn't angry. I wasn't rushing. I treated her things with more care than she had treated the truth. Each shirt, each pair of jeans, folded neatly, placed gently inside. She stood in the doorway watching me like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her face drained of color as it dawned on her that this wasn't a dramatic pause or a tactic. This was me accepting reality without negotiation. She tried to speak again, stumbled over her words, said maybe we needed time, maybe space, maybe this didn't have to happen all at once. What she wanted was a transition, a soft landing where she could leave without consequences, where she could still feel wanted, still feel in control of how this ended. But I wasn't offering that. I zipped the suitcase closed and set it gently on her side of the bed, the motion quiet but final. I told her she could take her time grabbing anything else she needed. My voice didn't shake. That seemed to unnerve her more than shouting ever could have. The fantasy where she was the one making the rules, where I was supposed to chase or crumble, was collapsing in real time. She realized then that the door I was giving her wasn't symbolic. It was real. And for the first time that night, she understood she would have to walk through it alone, without applause, without reassurance, without me standing there waiting if she changed her mind. I watched that understanding settle over her, and instead of satisfaction, I felt calm. The kind of calm that only comes when you stop fighting a truth you can't undo. I slept in the guest room that night, and for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel heavy. The room was smaller, the bed a little firmer, the walls bare compared to the bedroom we once shared, but none of that mattered. I lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting for the wave of pain everyone always talks about, the crushing loneliness, the regret, the urge to run back and fix things. None of it came. What I felt instead was space, like something tied around my chest had finally loosened. There was no heartbreak spiraling through my thoughts, no replaying her words on a loop. My mind was quiet in a way it hadn't been for months, maybe years. I realized how exhausting it had been to love someone who was already halfway gone, how much energy I'd spent trying to maintain something that only existed because I kept propping it up that weight was gone now. And, without it, breathing felt easier. I thought about the early days, the versions of us that felt almost unreal now. I remembered how she used to laugh at my dumb jokes, the kind you tell just to hear someone laugh, even if they aren't that funny. I remembered how she used to reach for my hand without thinking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. How she used to look at me like I was home. Those memories surfaced gently, without bitterness. They didn't stab or burn, they just existed, like old photographs you find in a drawer and feel neutral about. Lying there in that quiet room, it became painfully clear that the woman I had been trying to hold on to no longer existed. She hadn't disappeared overnight. She'd faded slowly, quietly, while I convinced myself that effort and patience could bring her back. Those memories weren't proof of something I lost that night. They were proof of how long it had already been gone. I rolled onto my side and listened to the house settling, the soft sounds of pipes and distant traffic outside. For once, I didn't feel like I was failing at something. I felt like I had finally stopped forcing myself to stay in a place where I wasn't wanted. The guest room wasn't lonely. It was honest. It didn't pretend, didn't demand, didn't drain me. As I drifted towards sleep, there was no dramatic realization, no promise of what came next. Just a calm acceptance of where I was in that moment. Alone, yes, but lighter. Free from the constant effort of loving someone who had already let go. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The knock came the next morning, light and uncertain, like she wasn't sure she had the right to be standing on the other side of the door. I was sitting on the edge of the guest bed, already dressed, already awake for hours, when I heard her voice crack as she asked if we could talk. There was something almost fragile in it, a tone I hadn't heard from her in a long time, and it confirmed what I already knew. She hadn't expected the quiet. She hadn't expected me to let go without a fight. I opened the door and stepped aside without saying much. I didn't invite her in warmly, but I didn't block her either. She stood there, arms crossed, eyes scanning my face like she was searching for signs of damage she could still work with. I stayed neutral, calm, and that seemed to throw her off more than anger ever would have. She started talking in circles, saying she'd been thinking all night, that maybe things had moved too fast, that she hadn't expected me to be so accepting. Then she said it, almost accusingly, that she didn't think I'd give up so easily. I looked at her and realized she truly believed that was what this was, me giving up, as if love was a tug-of-war and whoever pulled hardest won. I told her quietly that I wasn't giving up at all. I was letting go. There was a difference, and it wasn't one she liked hearing. She tried to regain her footing after that, shifting her words, offering possibilities instead of conclusions. Maybe we could take time. Maybe she could stay for a bit. Maybe we didn't have to decide anything right now. What she wanted were options, doors left half open, so she could come and go emotionally without ever fully leaving. She wanted the comfort of knowing I was still there if she changed her mind, still available, still waiting. But I wasn't unhooked from her words anymore. I didn't argue or counter her points. I didn't reassure her. I simply listened, nodded once, and told her she should do what she felt was right for her. The absence of resistance seemed to drain the energy from her body. Control was slipping, and she could feel it. That afternoon, she packed the rest of her things. I stayed seated in the living room, not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say or prove. When she rolled her suitcase toward the door, she paused, clearly expecting me to stand up, to stop her, to offer one last emotional moment she could hold on to. I stayed where I was, calm, and still she looked back at me one last time, confusion and disbelief written all over her face. And then she walked out. The door closed softly behind her. I didn't chase it. I didn't even stand. And I could tell, even without seeing her face, that this quiet finality stunned her more than any dramatic goodbye ever could. 2 weeks went by, and the silence held. No late-night calls. No emotional texts. No check-ins disguised as concern. I didn't reach out, and neither did she. Instead of spiraling, I slipped into a routine that felt grounding in a way I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I started going to the gym every morning, not to punish myself or prove anything, but because moving my body cleared my head. The weights felt honest. Progress there was simple and measurable, and every day I left a little stronger than I arrived. Work followed the same pattern. I focused. I closed deals I've been dragging out for months. Colleagues noticed a shift before I did, commenting on how sharp and energized I seemed. I laughed more during lunches, met friends for drinks without checking my phone every 5 minutes, and slept deeply at night. There was no dramatic reinvention, no forced positivity. I was just present in my own life again. At some point, out of pure habit, I posted a photo after a workout. Nothing flashy, just a mirror shot, sweat on my shirt, a quiet sense of accomplishment behind my eyes. Later that night, I noticed her name at the top of the story views. The next day, it was there again. And the day after that. She never unfollowed me. She never muted me. She watched everything in silence. She saw the early morning gym posts, the casual smiles with friends, the occasional work celebration. She saw that I wasn't unraveling. I wasn't drinking myself into oblivion or posting sad quotes or disappearing from the world. There was no public grief, no visible desperation, just consistency, just forward motion. I wasn't trying to send a message, but one was being delivered anyway. What struck me most was how little I thought about it. Her watching didn't change my behavior. I didn't post more or less because of her. I didn't curate an image for her benefit. I was living, and she was observing from the outside, no longer part of the equation. That imbalance said more than words ever could. In quiet moments, I realized how different this felt from the man I had been before that dinner. Back then, my sense of stability depended on her presence, her approval, her emotional temperature. Now, my days were built around things that belonged solely to me. My discipline, my friendships, my work, my peace. None of it required her participation. She watched a man rebuild not out of spite, but out of necessity. She watched the version of me that existed when I stopped trying to be chosen and started choosing myself. And the irony wasn't lost on me that the calm she couldn't sit with was the same calm that now defined my life without her. I saw her again at a backyard gathering a mutual friend was hosting. One of those casual evenings with string lights, low music, and people clustered around a fire pit pretending everything in their lives was simple. I noticed her before she noticed me, standing slightly off to the side with a drink in her hand, shoulders tense, scanning the yard like she was bracing herself. She looked the same and different all at once, familiar features wrapped in an unease I didn't remember. When our eyes met, her face flickered with surprise, then relief, then something closer to nerve. She walked over with a weak smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and said, "Hey, stranger," like we were old friends who'd lost touch, instead of two people who had dismantled a life together. I nodded back, calm, neutral, not cold out of cruelty, but distant out of clarity. I wasn't rehearsing lines. I wasn't guarding a wound. I just wasn't emotionally invested in the moment. She started with small talk, asking how I'd been, commenting on the weather, the food, anything to fill the space between us. Her words came out unevenly, and I could tell she was trying to read me, trying to reconcile the man standing in front of her with a version she'd left behind. This one wasn't anxious or eager to please. This one stood comfortably in his own skin, relaxed posture, steady eye contact, no rush to explain himself. I asked her how life was treating her, not to provoke her, not to be clever, but because it felt like the normal thing to say. The effect was immediate. Her shoulders stiffened, her grip on the glass tightened, and for a split second, she looked like she'd been caught off guard by her own answer. She hesitated, gave a vague response about things being fine, busy, you know how it is, and trailed off like she didn't quite believe herself. There was an awkward pause after that, the kind that used to make me uncomfortable enough to fill it. This time I didn't. I smiled politely, glanced past her toward a friend calling my name, and turned away mid-conversation without ceremony. No dramatic exit, no lingering look. I just left. As I walked back toward the fire pit, laughing at something someone said, I didn't look over my shoulder, but I didn't need to. I could feel it, the weight of her standing there alone, watching the version of me she no longer had access to. For the first time since that dinner weeks ago, I understood something clearly. This was her first real taste of what she'd lost. Not because I was cruel or distant, but because I was genuinely, undeniably unbothered. and that realization hit her harder than any argument ever could. Weeks passed after that night by the fire pit, and for the most part, my life kept moving forward without interruption. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a familiar name. The message was short and carefully casual, saying she had seen something that reminded her of me. Nothing more. No question. No apology. Just a line designed to test the water. I read it once, felt nothing stir, and set the phone down. I didn't block her. I didn't respond either. The message sat there, unread by her standards, unanswered by mine, and eventually faded into the background like everything else that no longer mattered. The real moment came later, unexpectedly, in the least dramatic place possible. I was at the grocery store after work, moving through the aisles with a list in my head, thinking about dinner and nothing else. I was comparing apples when I sensed someone standing too close. I looked up, and there she was, a few feet away, holding a basket she didn't seem aware of anymore. Her eyes lit up the way they used to when she thought she still had access to me. She smiled and said I looked good, her voice softer than usual, almost hopeful. I nodded and told her life had been good. It wasn't a performance. It was just the truth. That answer seemed to throw her off balance. She lingered, shifting her weight, glancing around the aisle like she was suddenly aware of how public this was, then leaned in slightly and said she missed talking to me. For a brief second, I saw what she was trying to do. She wasn't asking for reconciliation outright. She was fishing for connection, for nostalgia, for any sign that she still mattered in the same way in the past. That sentence would have cracked me open. In that moment, it landed flat. I gave a small shrug, not dismissive, just honest, and told her I had to finish shopping. I stepped around her cart and walked away, without waiting for a response. No argument followed me, no dramatic call of my name, just the quiet hum of refrigeration units and the sound of my own footsteps on tile. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel cruel. I felt done somewhere between the produce section and the checkout. I understood what had really changed. It wasn't that I had grown colder. It was that her words no longer had leverage. Standing there among apples and fluorescent lights, she finally saw it too. Whatever power she once had over me had dissolved, not through confrontation, but through absence. And I walked out of that store carrying groceries and a kind of freedom that didn't need to announce itself. The call came late on a Friday night, the kind of hour when people only reach out if they're lonely, desperate, or out of options. I stared at my phone for a few seconds before answering, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to be sure I was calm. When I picked up, her voice was raw, stripped of the confidence she once carried. She said she had made a mistake, and for the first time since all of this began, she didn't sound like someone testing the waters or looking for control. She sounded like someone standing in the aftermath of her own choices. I didn't interrupt her. I let her talk. She told me how everything she chased didn't feel the way she thought it would, how the excitement faded quickly and left her feeling hollow. She said the silence in her place was louder than she expected, that coming home to no one stopped feeling freeing and started feeling empty. She talked about missing the way I listened, the way life felt stable with me, the way I made things feel real instead of temporary. Each word came faster than the last, like she was afraid I might hang up before she got it all out. I listened without reacting, without correcting her, without filling the pauses. I wasn't reliving memories or reopening wounds. I felt detached in the healthiest way, like someone observing a storm they no longer lived inside. When she finally ran out of things to say, there was a quiet moment on the line, heavy and expectant. I knew she was waiting for reassurance, for warmth, for some sign that this confession changed something. I told her calmly that I hoped she eventually found peace with her choices. Then I said the words that had been sitting with me for weeks, the truth I hadn't needed to speak until now. I told her I wasn't the kind of man you get to choose twice. I didn't say it with anger or pride. I said it plainly, because it was true. What we had was real when it existed, and real things don't survive being walked away from and then reclaimed out of regret. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. The silence on the other end was enough. I wished her well and ended the call. When the screen went dark, I sat there for a moment, phone in my hand, waiting to see if sadness would creep in. It didn't. There was no rush of emotion, no second-guessing, just a steady sense of closure. She had walked away from something solid, something genuine, and by the time she realized its value, it no longer belonged to her. I set my phone down and went to bed feeling calm, not because I had won anything, but because I had finally chosen myself, and that choice brought peace instead of regret.